Well, hello, welcome to Midweek Life. My name is Josh, your host. We are in session 6, episode 6, whatever you want to call it, of our series on grief. How do we process grief in a healthy way? And how do we sit with people who are grieving? I have Laurie Lehman with me. Thanks so much for joining me.
Mm-hmm.
You shared with me, I think yesterday and a little bit this morning, a little bit of your story, and we're excited to hear it. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I was raised in a Christian home, a loving Christian family. I had an older brother, 3 years older than me, and a sister that's 5 years younger than me. And, we were very involved in our local church. When I was 9 at summer camp, accepted God and Jesus into my heart. And that was the first time. It was very significant for me because that was the first time that it became really personalized. I hadn't really felt like I had heard God speak up until that point, and I did at that point at camp, and it was just such a life-changing thing and just the beginning of the journey for me. And then I like to say that I had 8 years of bliss where you don't really realize that there's other things going on around you in the world. And so had 8 years of bliss where I just, enjoyed family. We were a close family, doing lots of things with our extended family. Really, as I said, involved in our church, and school was going great. And then when I was 17, I was a senior in high school, we got the call that my brother had passed away, and there was no cause for his death. He was found in his dorm room one morning in September, and he took his last breath the night before. And after lots of testing, they just could not pinpoint what exactly had caused that.
Wow.
And when you talk about grief, that's the first thing that comes to mind, in the sense of, like, never would I wish that kind of grief on anybody, even the person, that you think deserves like the worst punishment in the world. Never would I wish that on them. It was horrible. Like, it was my first best friend, and so at that point, I really began to question God, if he loved me, does he care, just really, like, what's the point of life, really? Like, I wasn't suicidal by any means, but it was like, okay, so what does this mean now? Because, like, the mundane things became a struggle. Like, you can't really even describe it until, it's just was a hard time, filled with lots of pain and anger. And so for about 6 months, I just kind of kept stuffing that all down, because, I had a reputation to uphold at school as well, because I was still a senior in high school. So on the outside, I was still this energetic, bubbly girl who knew everybody. But my basketball teammates could probably tell you that I was filled with anger and hate. It really just came out of me on the basketball court. And so 6 months probably post the time that Justin had passed, there was a youth rally at my church that I had been invited to go to. And quite honestly, didn't want to go. I had no desire to go. I had all these questions and things that I was struggling with God about, but there's all these attractive 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old guys that are going to be, like, leading this youth rally. And so I was like, well, what teenage girl is it like right there then, right? And so little did I know that it would be life transforming for me. The best way to describe it would be that I showed up that night, and it was just like that I was weighted down with this heavy suitcase, this backpack that was, like, on me, and it just, like, was oppressive. And it was one of those things where I was, like, there, but not really there. And then the song "I'm Trading My Sorrows" was very popular at the time. And it was like, I just felt God, like, calling me, like, Laurie, like, just trust me again, And so, I said, but God, like, all I have is this yuck, right? Like, all I have is the yuck, the pain, the anger. I don't have anything to offer. And he said, that doesn't matter, right? And so it was during that song that I just said, okay, well, here you go, and surrendered. And it was the most incredible moment that I've actually experienced, just the presence of God, in the sense of, like, my whole being, like, the oppression that I was feeling, like, was completely lifted off, and I was just filled with joy. And I would definitely say that through that experience, it just has really taught me just how much the joy of the Lord really is our strength. It was miraculous for me and life transforming. And I don't know where I'd be had I not had that moment with God and in his presence, if that makes sense.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Can you help us look at what that moment looked like when you had just that God experience. That it was a trading my sorrows moment, like
Yeah.
because you basically what you said was, well, I heard the song, felt God's presence. Like I'm not trying to minimize it, but it was like it was almost so miraculous. Like okay,
Yeah.
it was this, and this,
Yeah.
and then the joy of the Lord is my strength.
Yeah.
Like what led up to that, and then what did it really feel like?
Yeah.
In that moment.
Yeah. So, I think that there is an act on our part to be like engaged and like be like a willing participant, right? So like the worship's happening and like I had that hesitation, but like throughout the whole thing there was ongoing conversation and dialogue with me and the Lord, if that makes sense. And so I had resisted arriving, but like and I was filled with all this pain and anger, but like obviously I was still there and like I still believed and I still like wanted to trust God. And so like there was this willingness and openness to what God had for me in one sense, but then there's also this resistance. And so I think during that time it was just a formal act of surrender for me.
Yeah.
But I know that I was like in active surrender, hands up in worship and just kind of like open to what God had for me, if that makes sense.
But you were being prepped.
Yeah.
Beforehand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I had definitely like all these questions and ongoing like dialogue happening leading up to that, if that makes sense. Because I wanted like in the Bible, like there's so much available for us, right? So many promises, but I wasn't seeing it. So like it was like this tension of like, okay, but I'm not seeing this. So like knowing that there's more, right? But not like experiencing it. So but yet like coming to the altar knowing that like I still want the more, right? And so
with nothing to offer.
With nothing to offer, had nothing. Like I was broken completely and I had nothing to offer. It was I guess that's the best way to describe it.
That's good. So it was surrender.
Yeah, it was surrender. Yep. And
That's
then
really
just being like trusting God to then just use what I had to offer, but also like make it into something better, right?
Yeah.
So I did go to House of Hope for a while and did the Ultimate Journey, which was life transforming, which helped me. So like I always knew that I needed to renew my mind, but really what does that look like? I really had unlocked some tools that were helpful for me by going through Ultimate Journey.
Awesome.
Identifying some lies that I was believing that kind of had attached just throughout my childhood, but then also because of what I'd experienced with the passing of my brother,
Awesome.
about myself and about God. And relationships in general. And so it was really freeing for me, very freeing.
So that's really good.
Yep.
That's kind of a tool. So can you just briefly describe exactly what it is? It's It's over several weeks.
Yeah, quite a few weeks.
Yeah.
I want to say it was like 12.
And you meet with a facilitator?
Yeah, so I had 2 facilitators and then there are 3 of us in the group. And basically you start at infancy and you go through your current like day, age. And you're just looking at kind of being an ally for yourself. And so during those stages, what things or events stand out to you now as an adult that perhaps you're not even realizing that you're believing something that's not true.
That's right.
Because of just the way you processed it without kids process things every day, right? And they're not mature in their thinking. And none of us are, right? And so through that, things can be misinterpreted. And so the truth of who we really are in Christ might not be what one is believing because of the way, even though they're like, following Jesus and loving Jesus, there could be some things that are attached there. And that's how it was for me.
All right. So just a couple years ago,
Yep.
You were giving me your story of how you experienced a heart attack.
Yeah.
In a park with your children.
Yep.
Super traumatic.
Yep. Another kind of like life-changing moment for me would be on June 25th, 2019. I took my 2 boys, who at the time were 13 months and 29 months, to the park in Hiawatha. And we were going to go to the park to play at the splash pad. It ended up being closed, so we were swinging at this particular moment on a swing that's built for a baby and a mother or an adult. And I had all 3 of us on the swing, and as I took that first push to really get us going and really kind of, use some effort, I suddenly went from feeling fine to I couldn't catch my breath. My left arm hurt. I was really sweating quite a bit, and my heart was racing terribly. And so, at that moment, running through my mind, you've heard the symptoms, right? I was like, this isn't right. This is indicating like that something's going on with my heart. I had been physically active my whole entire life, had never had any heart problems. I should also say that I'd actually had my heart checked after my brother had passed. And at that point, there was no indicators that I had anything wrong with my heart.
Wow.
So running through my mind is like, what is going on? And so probably 5 minutes later, I was like, if that, okay, we have to leave. Something really is going on. Called my husband, who actually was in Minneapolis at the time. And I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And I said, these are my symptoms. And he said, you need to call the ambulance. And I was like, no way am I calling the ambulance. That's traumatizing for the babies. That's not happening. I'll drive myself to the ER. Like, that is not happening. So load up the babies. I do have to also say, it wasn't like I just could quickly load them up. I had to take some breaths. I had to sit and kind of let myself like catch my breath before I could fully like put them in the car, unpack everything, that type of thing. And finally we were on our way to the ER. And I just remember praying in all sincerity, like, God, let me get to the ER. Like, do not let something happen to me on the drive. And, you probably would say it's foolish now not to call the ambulance. In hindsight, like, what was I thinking? But the trauma, we prevented it. We're keeping the therapy fund low for the kids. So get to the ER. They start doing test after test after test. They, again, can't find anything wrong with my heart. And we're about to send me home. And I said, whoa. You can't be sending me home because when I moved to do these different tests, my heart, like, there's pain in my chest. Like, I'm not okay. And so they said that they would keep me overnight for observation. They also decided to take my blood work again. And through that process, they were watching my troponin levels. And that indicated that there was something going on with my heart. Troponin levels, when they increase, indicate a heart attack. And they still, though, were saying that I had just pericarditis, inflammation of the heart. Ended up doing the angiogram the next day. Again, test after test says nothing wrong with me. So they sent me home. And that led me into this journey of going to multiple doctors here locally, having lots and lots of testing. Nothing wrong. They had me go to a blood specialist to look and see if I had cancer, all these different things. And it was when I was then given the clear from my cardiologist after all this was over that we started asking about having more children. And she actually said, I would love to tell you that I think you're okay, but I want to send you, I want to get another opinion from Mayo up in Rochester, Minnesota. And in December of 2019, we saw the cardiologist who specialized in pericarditis, and he said, this is not pericarditis. I'm going to have you go back and do another test, a bubble study, and that will indicate whether or not there's a hole in your heart. And when I had that test done, there was a significant size hole that was in my heart that I had since birth. And so they, sent me back to the doctor after this test was done. And he was like, yeah, a lot of people who have this have no troubles. There's 25% of the population that have a hole in their heart like this, a PFO it's called, and they have no problems with it. And then there's another portion of the population that do have, a debilitating stroke or a heart attack that result from it. You just can't really predict who will have that happen. So
Goodness.
A heart attack at age 36, not the news you want to hear, but Dr. O called up his buddy, who is the man of all mans, who performs the surgery called a PFO closure surgery, which then would put basically a device into the hole, which then scar tissue would surround it, and it would become a part of my heart. Contacted him, and within 3 weeks, I was having the procedure, the surgery done. Wow. And talking to that doctor, we just really saw Romans 8:28 play out, where God is working all things for good, because never did I want that to happen. Never did I want to experience that with my children. There was so much fear in that moment. There was so many questions. But because of that, my life probably will be much longer now. I was most likely would have had a stroke or a heart attack at a very early age that would have been very, very debilitating. And I didn't have that. And so we can only contribute it to the hand of God, really orchestrating the doctor here who misdiagnosed it, that I was frustrated with, who said, no, we need to check with Mayo. Like, thank the Lord for her, right? Who sent us there, even like using her professional judgment to say, like, let's go get it checked out further. And then just that I was paired up with Dr. O, who knew Dr. Reeder, who then also said that I was one of 6 out of the over 1,000 surgeries that he's performed like this, that didn't come to him having experienced something that really had impacted my life in a very, like, it would have looked much differently as far as if I would have had a stroke or a heart attack that could have been much more severe.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's huge.
Yeah. So again, in that, we can just, see how God has been faithful throughout the entire really course. It was terrible to go through that. It caused me to have fear that I had to deal with. And actually, that's another story in itself. There was prayer here at church the one day where I just was freed from so much of that pain and fear that I was having. Pastor Wayne was actually speaking that day. And, it's just been a journey. Like, I would never have wanted to go through this experience. But hearing Dr. Reeder say you're one of the 6 that I've done, and knowing what could have been, as far as just the timeline of my life now, has been extended significantly. It could have looked so much different, in the sense of, like, I did have a heart attack, but there's been no damage to my heart. There was no physical therapy, no, like, follow-up that I had to actually, like, go and do to function back at my normal state, if that makes sense.
Awesome.
So I'm just praising God for that.
You mentioned Romans 8:28.
Yeah.
We've talked about that verse, and how just this idea of how do we sit with people? Mm-hmm. Because so often, as Christians, we just resort to just trust Jesus, trust Jesus, just trust Jesus. Now, in your situation, you were able to, that was a very healthy thing for you.
Yeah, it was very healthy.
To just go back to the Word and lean on His promises.
Well, because if I would have looked elsewhere, I would have been, like, full of self-pity, and I would have been depressed, and I would have been hopeless. Because a heart attack at 36, when you have young kids, when you're wanting to have more children, that's a big one to swallow. Like, like, had I let myself go there, it would have led to nothing but being depressed and not being hope-filled and not really trusting in who God is and trusting, like, the promises of who he says that I am and, like, the future that I have in him and here on earth.
So what would you say? How would you sit with someone?
Well, I can't say that I've always gotten it right.
Yeah.
I think that listening is key. I think also just knowing that there's no timeline to grief, right? It looks different for everyone. And so that makes it hard, and it makes it, there's some grace that you can give because of that, because you know that it looks different for others. I think for me, sometimes when I haven't gotten it right, it's like, okay, like, let's move beyond, right? So, like, it also has been a learning experience for me on how to sit with people and give that grace and let them feel what they need to feel. But also, like, we've all been there, right? Where we've had the conversations where we leave and we're like, whoa, that was awful. Like, it's not uplifting. It's not hopeful. But so how do we, like, listen and speak truth? And I think that there's a way to do it without, like, beating them with scripture, but just, like, when we have the word of God and the truth in us, we can speak it in a way that's encouraging, that they can leave hope filled. But it doesn't feel like it's banging them on the head with the word of God, if that makes sense.
That's really good.
So, yeah.
So there's going to be hundreds of people that watch this, which is really cool.
That's awesome, yeah.
Which is so cool. So everyone's gonna be able to hear your story and process through it.
Yep.
And there's gonna be several people who are currently, as they're watching, they're just really sad and they're going through something in your life. Having gone what you've gone through and experienced, what would you just want to say to them?
I think that the biggest is, like, just to feel what you need to feel, right? And as you feel, though, don't let the emotions get you swept into things that aren't true. There's so many lies that can be thrown at you about, like, just about anything, right? Because you're working through so much stuff. And so there's this responsibility that we have to not only to work through the grief and to feel it, like, because I think that that's healthy, but also while we're doing that, like having the right people supporting you, still being intentional about being in the Word of God, so that you're still like keeping yourself in check, right? And like having those healthy support people to make sure that we're not starting to attach lies to our person, right?
Support people like who?
Family, friends, those closest, those people that know and love God too. Like if you're, I mean, everybody's in a different place on their journey, and life's a journey. Your relationship with God is a journey. But I think that when you're going through things like that, having people who have that relationship with the Lord, who have experience with it, really does help. Good friends that just listen and accept you for where you're at is also key. Very much like Jesus, right? He accepts us just where we're at. And so I think that it reminds me actually of this kid's book about the rabbit that listened. I don't even really know. It's like in the Dolly Parton library, but like all these it's called The Rabbit Listened. And all these people came by and they had all these solutions to this kid whose blocks fell down. And the rabbit came and he just sat with the child who was upset. And then he went through and experienced all of these emotions, and he felt all the things that all the other people wanted him to feel, but he just sat there and was present. And so I think that it's a silly little story with such huge like application for us just to sit and like, that's what Jesus does, right? He's not scared of all those different feelings, but he's the rabbit who's just closer, right, than anyone we know, and just with us in that. So
that's really good.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today. That's very valuable stuff. It's been a pleasure just even getting to know you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us again. Ultimate Journey, I think that was a huge takeaway. If you're someone that just needs to stop believing the lies that you feel about yourself, and you just know that there are the truths of God that are surrounding your life, and you just need to realize those things and come to grips with those things and make those truths known in your life. Ultimate Journey kind of takes you through that process. Just contact the office. We will hook you up. And that's it. Thanks again.